So I'm going to proceed in the opposite direction from Swami Atmarupananda. I'll start with the questions because I want to end on a sort of a comprehensive note rather than ending on a variety of different questions and thoughts. So I'll take up two or three of the remaining questions. Science assumes matter as fundamental. Spirituality, non-duality, assumes consciousness as fundamental. So question part one, will science ever come to the same agreement as non-duality? So yes, a very good question. That science starts with matter as fundamental, and Advaita begins with with consciousness as fundamental, as the reality itself. And will they ever come to a meeting place? Swami Vivekananda believed that they would. He felt, let me put it in a different way, because I'm saying Swami Vivekananda believed, he felt, yes, that's all true, but there's a good reason for believing it. And so let me just state it as a worthy thought in itself, because otherwise it sounds like we're just depending on the authority of Swamiji, which for someone like me may be okay, because I have a feeling for who Swamiji was, and what he said means a lot to me. But that shouldn't be given as objective proof to everybody, that because Swami Vivekananda said, you should believe it. No, not like that. So, will they come to the same point, science and religion? Yes, if they both proceed far enough. And I should say that if they both proceed far enough, the burden now is on science, not so much on Advaita, because Advaita has penetrated to reality itself. Where do you go beyond reality? When you come to the fundamental nature of the universe, then what? Well, there's no then what. You come to the secret of existence. But science also is a search for reality. Science is a search for truth, and it's a worthy search for truth. And the methodology is very good. The basis of it is good, and so there's no fundamental reason for a disharmony between true spirituality and science. Between religion as an institution and science, yes, because in all religions, without exception, all religions, they're historical traditions which are mixtures of truth and cultural tradition. They're stories for explaining the truth and so forth. And when you come to the stories, some religions take the story itself as a historical story, when perhaps it was meant to illustrate a higher truth in the form of a story, but as a story it's contradicted by science or by history. And so when you take religion as a tradition, yes, you're going to find scientific contradictions to that religion. But if you take religion as spirituality, that is the experiential part of religion, that's where you're dealing with the deeper experience you come to when the mind and heart have become purified. When you follow, like in the Christian path, of purgation, illumination, and union, the three steps of the Christian mystical path. The same thing exists in all of the religions. When you follow that and you come to perception, you can't argue with experience. You can't argue with experience. You can argue with dogma, you can argue with theory, not with experience. You can say that, yes, your experience is not yet complete. There's an experience beyond that which is grander and which gives a fuller truth and a fuller view of the truth. But you can't argue with experience itself and say, no, you didn't have the experience. Well, yes, I did. Spirituality has come to the reality itself, and science will come to that eventually in its own way. As Swami Vivekananda said, physics melts into metaphysics. There's a point where physics comes to the end of physics and it plunges into metaphysics. And then at least the scientific method as we know it now will come to a point where it's pointing at the truth, and then perhaps the scientists will realize that now we need what are called spiritual disciplines in order to get further into our inquiry. That we've taken ourselves as far as the External method can take us, but now we found that we have to do something else to get to the furthest end. But the method, if it's searching for truth, and if truth is non-dual, it will eventually get at least to the point where it's pointing at a non-dual truth and say, now we need inner disciplines to realize it. Science began by taking this universe for granted, the common sense universe. What is all of this? What is all of this? How does it work? What is it made out of? Break everything up into small pieces and see what the ultimate pieces are. But in the 20th century, the common sense universe disappeared. It started breaking apart in the late 19th century with experimentation, but they couldn't figure out what was going on because it didn't seem to make sense. But then with Einstein's relativity theories, special and general, and then the quantum mechanics and so forth, the common sense universe fell apart. Matter fell apart. Science began by accepting matter as matter, as it is given by the senses. But science can't accept that anymore. This is not at all what it looks like. Not at all what it looks like. By the scientific method itself. This is mostly empty space with far separated tiny electrical charges, but mostly empty space, vacuum. That's not what it looks like. It looks pretty solid, but that's what it is. So matter has become dematerialized by science itself. And in other ways also, in the biology and chemistry and physics and all of the sciences, they're coming to a point where the analysis of the common sense universe has disappeared, or the common sense universe has disappeared under their analysis into something that they didn't expect. And so let me just say one more thing on that line, and then I'll go to the next question. When I was in junior high school, I was in the 8th grade, I picked up a book in the junior high school bookstore called The Universe and Dr. Einstein by Lincoln Barnett. It was an early popularization of Einstein's relativity. It was a wonderful book. And it fascinated me. It lit my imagination in a way that no book had lit it before. But one of the things I still remember, one of several things I still remember from the book, and when I read it, I didn't quite know what it meant, but I knew that it was true, and I knew that somehow I knew it was true, and that it was extremely important for my life. Lincoln Barnett says that modern physics, in its analysis of the physical world, has found that the universe is becoming more, in their analysis, is becoming more and more a mental universe. Rather than a physical fact. It's becoming more and more a thought rather than a fact. And so yes, science has gone to the point where physics is beginning to, even at that time, and this was written in the late 50s, I read it in the early 60s, where science is beginning to point towards metaphysics. So yes, I believe that they will come to agreement. Or spirituality, will it always remain a personal quest? That's the other part of the same question. Well, there's always the point where it becomes a personal quest, but not a personal quest as it's my Swami Atmarupananda quest and not your quest. No, not personal in that sense. Not personal in the sense that it only pertains to Swami Atmarupananda or Mataji Brahmaprana or some particular person. But there is a point where the quest becomes internal. The Atman can't be realized through instrumentation. It can't be realized through mathematics. It can't be realized through realized in a chemical laboratory. It can be realized only within consciousness, because it is consciousness. And so at some point it becomes an internal quest. And so my conviction is that science will come to the point where that is true for scientists also. Second question, do dreams have any significance, or are they non-coherent byproducts of an overly noisy mind? That's an interesting question, because in many societies, the content of dreams was what was interesting to people. You find in the Jewish tradition, in the Torah of the Jews, there was the analysis of dreams in some of the stories, and you find in Islam and Christianity and in Hinduism, you find talk about dreams and the content of dreams. And of course, Freud began the analysis of dreams, and then Jung started his analysis of dreams, and other psychologists did the same. Interesting thing is, they found that a person going to a Freudian psychologist started having Freudian dreams, and if the same person changed to a Jungian psychologist, they started having Jungian dreams. And the dreams were influenced by the type of the expectations of their psychotherapist or their analyst. So, but Vedanta was not primarily interested in the content. It was interested in the fact of dreaming. The fact that the mind could do that, the fact of the different states of consciousness. But Ayurveda, the medical system of Hinduism, it was interested in interpreting dreams for medical purposes, for the purposes of diagnosis. So dreams, they're dreams and they're dreams. They're dreams which are just the byproduct of the noise of the mind, yes. But sometimes dreams have spiritual significance, and sometimes they tell you something about yourself. So they can be revealing psychologically. They can sometimes you have a dream which would predict something that's going to happen in your life, and then it actually happens. And then sometimes dreams reveal a higher spiritual truth. As I gave an example of people who receive a mantra in a dream, which is a real living mantra, and they attain to realization through repeating the mantra. I've known a Swami who that happened to, Swami Atmarupananda. He told me the story of how he received an initiation in a dream, in a dream where he went to a temple in the dream. And then the two people I know who had dreams that they were not the body. So there are types of dreams. But in general, I don't recommend, and most of our Swamis don't recommend, getting involved in analyzing the contents of your dream, because most of it is just noise of the mind. And people who get too caught up in trying to record their dreams and remember what they dreamt and writing down and analyzing and all of that, that gets you just lost in an analysis of mostly mental noise. It's not worthwhile. So we're more interested in the fact of dreaming. I'll just answer one more. Let's see. To see what is the luck of the draw. Individual consciousness appears to be limited. A pure consciousness is unlimited. How do we bring them or perceive them as the same? Limited consciousness or pure consciousness? Yes, that's a good question. Philosophical question. We have limited consciousness. I see all of you here, but I only see from my perspective. I don't see from inside of you. My consciousness is limited. I feel that I'm an individual. And yet, Vedanta says that my limited consciousness is the infinite consciousness if I knew it for what it was. So there's the appearance of my consciousness being limited. And yet Vedanta says the fact is it's unlimited. It's just that you are looking at it in the wrong way. You're looking at it as it's filtered through the mind and body. But that same consciousness is the infinite consciousness. So it's not that my consciousness is limited and somehow I'm going to connect it to the universal consciousness through a consciousness pipe or tube, and then suddenly I'm connected to the infinite consciousness. No, I suddenly realize that all sense of limitation disappears, that the sense of limitation itself was the illusion, was the basis of the illusion, which allowed me to dream other limitations. That illusion disappears, and then I realize I am the infinite consciousness. So how do you go about it? How do you go about it? There are a variety of disciplines, and that's basically what we've been talking about, even though I realize that it's not clear that's what we've been talking about, but that is what we've been talking about. And one of the, let me mention one way, because otherwise it'll take up all the rest of the time for this one question. I'll just mention one way, which I referred to yesterday, and that is the sense of I am, the sense that I am. It's a wonderful meditation. And I wanted to spend some of this time giving you meditations, not guiding you in different meditations, which would be very good and would be even better, but there's not time for that, but at least giving you a description of a meditation. So let me give you this description of a meditation. You try to feel the sense of I am. Not I am Swami Atmarupananda, not I am this body, not the psychophysical system, not I'm a man or I'm a woman, not I'm young or I'm old, not that I'm a Swami or a householder, none of that. Just I am. The fact, the bare, naked fact that I am. You just try to feel that, and then you try to hold on to it. You just try to hold to the sense of I am. That's a subtle process because, of course, it doesn't have any handle to hold on to. It's not something that you can, okay, get my hands on it, okay, I'm not going to let it go. No. It's just something that you have to first feel and then try to stay with it. Just try to stay with the sense of I am. If you can do that, that itself is enough. That will take you to realization if we could do it long enough. The problem is that we're not simple enough and the mind won't rest satisfied long enough to do it for most of us, but it is enough in itself. Just to sit with the sense, I am. And whenever other things come and associate with the sense of I am, to say, no, just I am. Just the bare naked fact that I am. And so when you try to do that, you try to feel I am, and of course there's a sensation of the body there. And you're trying to feel I am, but the body is right there in the way. That's okay. Let the body be. Let the sensation of the body be. You don't have to do anything with it. You don't have to deny it. You don't have to get out of it. You don't have to kill it. You don't have to negate it. Just keep remembering that the I am is one thing, and that sensation of the body is floating in the midst of the I am. The I am is there by itself. Whether the body appears or disappears, the I am is there. So just hold to the I am. Thoughts come. And maybe your name comes to mind or something. That's okay. Those are just thoughts. Let them come, let them go. But in the midst of all of it, so you're not trying to banish thoughts, you're not trying to get rid of the perception of the body, none of that. You just try to simply, in the midst of everything, just hold to the sense that I am. Simply, I am. And if you do that as a regular practice, at first it's difficult because we're not used to thinking it. It should be the easiest of all meditations because it's there all of the time. From the time you wake up till the time you go to sleep, the sense of I am is there. You dream, the sense of I am is there. In deep sleep, the sense I am is not there, but the essence of it is there. The fact that you are there is there. And that's what within the mind comes, manifests as the sense I am. It's the fact that you experience in deep sleep, the bare fact that I am is there, without even any mentation, without any functioning of the mind. And then in the dream and waking state, it expresses itself in the sense I am, the verbalizable sense I am. So it's not the words, but that sense which you can verbalize as I am. And so just hold on to that. And as you do that, if you make a practice of it, it becomes easier and easier. Until eventually, what happens with most types of meditation happens with that, and that is that it becomes something that's part of your mind, part of your consciousness all of the time. All of the time you have a sense, I am. That becomes like I mean this figuratively, not like you start seeing a light, but it becomes like a light within your consciousness, just that sense, I am. It's come to the forefront. It's come out of the ignored background and into the foreground, so it's there. Then another thing happens. You begin to see that the I am is not small. The I am is that in which all of my thoughts and perceptions arise. Every thought arises within I am. Every perception arises. You look at the sun and the sun rises in the I am. The moon moves in the I am. The galaxies exist in the I am. The whole universe exists in the I am. And as I said yesterday, yes, I am that. And not just this I am, every I am is that. So it's not that the I am becomes something out there and I'm looking at the I am. No, that I am that. I am that. Again, language makes me externalize it and say, you start feeling the I am, as if the I am is something. I'm here and I'm feeling the I am. And then I'm standing here looking at the sun and I see, oh, the I am is there. No, it's not like that. I am. The I am is what I am. But that sense of I am begins to become cosmic. And as it does that, it becomes less and less personal. You don't think of the I am in association with the individual ego. You begin to feel that the I am is, in a sense, impersonal. Again, the problem of language. The word impersonal in English, that we think of impersonal, first of all, he's a very impersonal person, meaning he's not very friendly, he doesn't like people and so forth. Another sense of impersonal is a rock. A rock has no personhood, it has no personality, and so a rock. That's impersonal. Personhood is much higher than that. But no, here it's impersonal, meaning it's not referring to a particular individual person. What I am, that sense begins to become, no, it has nothing to do with Swami Atmarupananda. It has nothing to do with his body and mind. It is reality itself. It is a thing in itself. And again, the problem of language, because I'm already talking again about the I am as something. That isn't this and that's not that. No, I am not that. I am impersonal. So that's a wonderful meditation and that's one of the ways, in answer to this question, how do we bring the individualized consciousness and the cosmic consciousness together? So, now, let me, one other point I want to make, which is not pertinent to anything I was just talking about, but it is something that I wanted to say at the beginning of this morning. Didn't get it said, and so for my own sake I'm going to say it. It was something that was that I thought of in relationship to what Swami Atmarupananda was talking about in the first class, the first lecture, when he said about the usefulness of these ideas, Advaita here and now, the usefulness of spiritual life here and now. It's not just about a distant goal that we attain someday and we slog and struggle and go through misery and suffering and trial and all of that, and the purgation that's talked about in different traditions, and the dark night of the soul, and all these dark images, and fighting with demons if your tradition has fighting with demons, and all of these things that are talked about. And then at the very end you sort of stumble into the ocean of infinite bliss. But all the way along, it's all misery until you somehow stumble into the goal, and then you're finished. No. Every step of the path is fulfilling. Every step of the path gives meaning to your life. And so I want to tell an incident about that, the one that I'm fond of telling, but I don't think I've ever told it in Dallas. And that is from a man named Stephen Levine. He's a Buddhist teacher, American Buddhist teacher, who did a lot of work with prisoners, and during the AIDS epidemic in San Francisco, the initial AIDS epidemic in San Francisco, he did a lot of work with AIDS patients and victims. And so there was a young man that he had been counseling. He was in his 20s, and he had contracted AIDS, and was in the hospital, and this was a time when AIDS was a death sentence, that you didn't survive it. And so it was known that he was going to die, as he was in the hospital on his deathbed. And so one day Stephen came to him, after he'd been coming to him for a while, came to him, and the young man started weeping. And so he said, "What's the matter? What's the matter? Can I help?" And the young man said, "My parents came. My parents are from the middle of the country. They're very conservative, and they came to me and said," whatever, we'll say his name was Bill. I don't remember what it was, but he said, "Bill, you have wasted your life. You're going to hell. You're going to suffer all eternity because you have made a bad choice," because he was homosexual. "You're going to suffer. You're going to go to hell. And just repent before it's too late, otherwise you have wasted your whole life." And so then the man said, so they went away after telling me that. And that was their goodbye. But then at first I was heartbroken. But then I thought, no, I found my path. I found my path. And that's enough for one life. And so I can die happy. And so yes, he was a young man. He didn't attain to illumination. He didn't have time to practice long disciplines and to learn mindfulness and all of that, but he found meaning, and he found purpose, and he found that now I know where to look for the truth. I know where it is. I know where to find it. My feet are on the path. Now all I have to do is to walk it. In this life and in the next life, wherever I am, is just to follow that. And that is a great thing. So, yes, the spiritual life, every step that we take is meaningful. Every step we take gives us value. And so never give way to discouragement that, oh, it seems so long, the goal is so far away. No, if you follow the path, after some time you'll see that, no, it's made a great difference in my life. For a long time you can't see it because the changes are so gradual and the changes are so slow you don't see them. But over a long period of time you'll look back and you'll see, no, my life isn't the same. My life isn't wasted. I have gone somewhere. I may still have a long way to go, but that's okay. Swami Vivekananda used to give the example of the man that, the sadhu, an old sadhu who was walking in the Himalayas on his way to a place of pilgrimage, and Swamiji was going along with him on the same path. And this old sadhu was having great difficulty, and he told the Swami that I just can't go forward, I can't do it. And so the Swami told him, look, you're going to such and such a place, the place of pilgrimage. But look at your feet. Your feet are on the path. That is the path that is connected to the place of pilgrimage where you're going. You're already connected to the place where you're going. All you need to do is just to keep putting your feet one foot in front of the other. You're already on the path. The path is connected to the place you're going. Just focus on that. And so that's what we need to do, not to think, oh, the goal is so far away, I'll never get there. No, the goal isn't far away at all. The goal is right here. There's the time element. I haven't attained to illumination. That's what I've given my life to, but I haven't attained to the highest illumination. I'm just struggling to attain what I can. But at least I've learned this, that it's right here. And there's just this thin forgetfulness which is insubstantial, which is keeping me from it. And so let me keep blowing at that insubstantial film of forgetfulness until I can remember that which I am. It's just a question of remembering what I am. Just a question of coming out of this fog of illusion. So, now let me come to a little bit of the text before I ask if there are any remaining questions. I want to come to verse 16, which is on page 75. This is one of my favorite. The second verse, number 2, is my favorite, which we dealt with a lot yesterday morning. And this is one of my other favorites in this text, which you'll see why in a moment. Na prakasheham ityukti yat prakasha nibandhana swaprakasham tamatmanam aprakasha katham smirshet. So this says that na prakashe, I don't know, I don't illuminate, I don't know. I don't know. Such statements have as their foundation illumination. I don't know. That very statement has as its foundation illumination. So how can ignorance affect the self-luminous self? That's a wonderful idea. I say, I don't know. The very fact that I say, I don't know, inside of that statement, I don't know, means that I am shining. I'm conscious. That's what's important. It's not the data, the facts. It's not the particular datum somebody was asking about. It's the fact that I, sada bhami, I'm always shining, as that verse number 2 said. I'm always shining. The truth within me is always shining. And in that truth, the idea, I don't know, arises. That's just one more idea. Maybe the answer does come to me, and I say, oh, the answer is a squared plus b squared equals c squared. That's just another thing that arises within my consciousness. Or I say, yes, the answer is oigo, the Spanish I hear in the imperative. That's just another idea which has arisen within consciousness. The fact is that even saying I don't know means I know. I know what? I know that I don't know. But the important thing is that I know. I'm conscious. I'm awake. And so it's a wonderful statement that I don't know, such statements have, I don't know, within quotes, such statements have as their foundation illumination. How then can ignorance affect the self-luminous self? The self is luminosity itself. And within that, sleep comes, sleepiness comes, darkness comes, different things come, but consciousness remains. That's the important fact. That's the important fact. The fact of consciousness, the fact of awareness. So let's go to number 17. Tatapya bhati kopyesha vichara bhava jivanaha avashyaya tilakashe vichararkodaya badhi. That's a tongue twister. So, tatapi, even so, chidakashe, in the space of consciousness, even so, this which has been given in the previous verse, that even the sense of I don't know, that happens within consciousness. So even so, in the space of consciousness, kopi, whatever it is, esha vichara abhava jivana, this life without inquiry. So even so, in the space of consciousness, this life without inquiry, avashyaya, the mist of this life without inquiry, until the sun of inquiry rises, shines. Or let me just do the English, because it'll take too much time to go through the Sanskrit and relating it to English. Even so, this mysterious life without inquiry, like a mist, shines within the space of consciousness until the rising of the sun of inquiry. So this life without inquiry shines within the space of consciousness. So yes, I say I'm ignorant. I don't know. Everything is like a mist. I'm confused. That also is shining within consciousness. I'm looking at the confusion, which is just another datum, which is just another data point. It's just another idea within the mind. But the fact is that also is shining in the light of consciousness. This whole universe, I'm confused about the universe. I'm confused about so many things. I'm worried about so many things. All of those are just things arising within the mind, but all of it within the ocean of consciousness which I am, and that consciousness which never sleeps. Even when the mind goes to sleep and dreaming stops, it still shines in the darkness of the state of deep sleep. And 18 says, I'll just go to the English, when this long dream of the world manifests in the great sleep of ignorance of the self, these delusions, such as heaven and moksha, moksha meaning liberation, what in some traditions they would call salvation, but what we call liberation, manifest. So when this long dream of the world manifests in the great sleep of ignorance of the self, these delusions, such as heaven and liberation, manifest. So, as I explained yesterday, the basis of our ignorance is the fact that we have forgotten the self. That's due to the avarana shakti of ignorance. That is the covering power of primordial ignorance. That is, there's this power of, we are ignorant, we don't know who we are, and so we don't know that we are the infinite self, and so there's the experience of ignorance, the experience of forgetfulness, and it's out of that forgetfulness which we experience directly in deep sleep, just the absence of everything, just the sense of the sense of the absence of everything. That is the experience of the covering over the self. And then out of that, dreaming and waking come, and other worlds come, and our spiritual practice comes, our liberation comes. When we are liberated, we go beyond all of that. But then we discover that there was no bondage and there's no liberation, because I was always free. Somehow I just forgot it. It's like Kafka's wonderful story, Metamorphosis. In the Metamorphosis, the protagonist in the story, he wakes up and finds himself to be a bug. He's lying in the bed and he finds that he's no longer the person he thought he was, he's a bug. And so imagine if you wake up one morning and find yourself to be an insect. You're not the person that you had been. You thought, my God, what's wrong? What's going on? I was Swami yesterday, and now I'm a bug. And so you go to the doctor and say, doctor, you've got to help me. Please, please, you've got to help me. I woke up this morning and I'm an insect and I don't know what to do. The doctor looks at you and he smiles a little bit and he realizes there's something wrong with your mind. That you're not a bug at all, but you think you're a bug. And so the doctor says, okay, now what am I going to do? Or thinks, what am I going to do for this man? And so he gives me some pills and says, which are just sugar tablets, says, you take these, take 3 a day, and it doesn't matter whether you're on an empty stomach or full stomach, doesn't matter. But take 3 a day until you come back to being a human being. And so then I go home and I take 3 a day, and then I go to sleep, and the next morning I wake up and whatever fever was in the brain, it's gone, and I see myself as a human being again. Was I ever a bug? No, I wasn't. I never became a bug. The man in Kafka's story never became an insect. So I didn't become a bug. I thought I was. And so when I go to the doctor, if the doctor tells me, you're not an insect, get out of here, it hasn't solved my problem, because I say, I am. So if I come to a spiritual teacher and say, sir, I want enlightenment, say, you are the self, get out of here. What kind of crazy talk are you talking about? That doesn't help me. So he takes me in and says, okay, now do this practice, and yes, do this, and try to think of the self like this, and so forth. And then the time comes when I realize the self, and then I realize there was never any bondage. What was I thinking? There was never any bondage. There was never any problem. There was never any illusion. I just thought that there was. And so here, when this long dream of the world manifests in the great sleep of ignorance of the self, these delusions, such as heaven and moksha and relative existence, manifest. Let's see, we'll go to 19. And again, just going to the English. In me who am sentience itself, this division of sentience and insentience is imagined like the moving and unmoving elements on the smooth surface of a mural. So we make a big distinction between sentience and insentience. This is insentient. It's not conscious. I, as a human being, am sentient. A dog is sentient. A cat is sentient. A plant is sentient. Some people might doubt that, but no, a plant has sentience. It responds as a sentient being. Jagadish Chandra Bose showed experimentally long back in the end of the 19th century. But we make a distinction between that and rocks and water and things like that, which are insentient. And so we say the world is sentient beings and insentient beings. Swami Atmarupananda talked some about the difference between Advaita and Vishishtadvaita of Ramanuja, where Ramanuja said that there is a material universe peopled by sentient beings, and there is God, which the whole is God plus sentient beings and material creation. And so, again, that is a common sense sort of religious standpoint, which accepts the things of our common experience. But here he's saying that the distinction between sentience and insentience, that is part of the illusion. Just like if you have a mural, you paint it on a wall, people and dogs and cats and cows and trees, and then you put some rocks and a lake and all of that, and you say, oh, this is insentient and this is sentient. These people here in the mural, these are sentient, this cow is sentient, this tree is sentient, the lake is insentient, the rock is insentient. No, it's all the same. It's only us who project onto that the sense of sentience and insentience. And so again, as the Swami warned, let me also warn that you have to always be aware of what level you're speaking from. So from the ordinary level, when we're operating in the normal, it's quite an abnormal level, but when we're operating at this level, and we're doing practical things that are practical from the standpoint of this level, we're leading our ordinary lives and making our ordinary living and so forth, then yes, there's a difference between a sentient being and an insentient being. That's because there's a difference in the way that my perception of this world works. But when I rise to a higher level, then I see that everything is sentience. There's nothing but sentience. There's a beautiful verse in the Yoga Vasishta which says that sentience rises in the waves of the ocean, sentience rises in the rocks of the mountains, sentience rises everywhere, that sentience is pervasive of the whole universe, that everything, there's nothing but consciousness everywhere, that everything is consciousness itself. This itself is a manifestation of consciousness. If God is the reality, and all of this is appearance, then what difference could there be in reality? I'm not talking about practical, everyday experience right here that we have now, but in reality, what distinction could there be between a chair and a living being? None. So again, that doesn't mean that in your transactional reality that you treat people like chairs. No, you make a distinction, but that's because of the level of reality that we're living at and experiencing, where the world works within its own terms. The world works within its own terms. But that doesn't stop me from knowing that there is a higher level of perception where everything becomes sentient. Something I've often mentioned. I haven't mentioned this weekend. Most of you have not heard it, and those of you who heard it years ago will have forgotten it. But when I first went to the training center at Belur Mutt, and I was new to Indian culture. I'd been to India once before for my spiritual initiation, but only for a month. And then I'd been in an ashram in America for 5 years, and now I was going to India to live. So many things about Indian culture were completely new to me. And so I would see that the brahmacharyas, the other novices in the seminary where I was being trained, that when they touched somebody with their foot, then they would touch the person like that and salute them like this, meaning that, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to disrespect you by touching you with my foot. And then I would see that even if they kicked a desk by accident, they're walking into a room and they accidentally kick a desk, then they go over and touch the desk and salute it. And I thought, well, that's kind of nice, kind of interesting. Then one day I saw a brahmachari accidentally kicking the trash can. And he bent over and touched the trash can and went like that. I thought, now this is getting ridiculous. There's not some little being in a trash can who feels insulted because somebody kicked it. Get real. But then later I saw, no, it's not about the trash can. It's about realizing that I shouldn't disrespect anything. That if everything is the being, and I don't say that the brahmachari necessarily had this philosophical viewpoint, but it's the viewpoint which supports the cultural practice. That I shouldn't disrespect anything, because everything is the manifestation of divinity. Everything is an appearance of divinity. And I should recognize that divinity everywhere and in everything that I interact with. If I respect everything, people, even material creation, give respect to everything, I find that everything gives its best back to me. If you go to a great violinist and you want to learn the violin, and you say, hey, teacher, here's $1,000, teach me the violin. Come on, I don't have much time, I've got things to do, let's have the first lesson right now. Is the teacher going to be pleased with you as a student? If the teacher is very poor and desperate for money, they may grudgingly give you a lesson just so they have something to eat. But a great musician, if you approach them and say, revered sir, revered madam, I know I've heard so much of you, you're a great musician, I want to learn from you, and I know so much, I've heard so much about you. Let me be your student. And I approach with respect, proper respect, and then the teacher is going to tend to give their best to me. They're going to tend to want to give their best to me. And so, if I respect everything in the universe, it won't turn off. Oh, it goes down. Oh, it's something else. Anyway, this is a problem with technology. It's great when it works. We've been having lots of trouble with sound equipment in Houston also, so I sympathize with the complexity and the difficulty. So let me look at one last verse very quickly, because this is important from what we've talked about, and then I'll open up to question and answers. Verse 20 says, even my witnesshood, which is dependent upon connection to mental activity, is not real, but only an assumption in this waveless ocean of consciousness alone. So we talk a lot in Vedanta, and we've talked this weekend about being the Sakshi, being the Sakshi Chaitanya, being the witnessing consciousness, being the witness, watching everything as the witness, and establishing ourselves in the position of the witness, so that we're watching but not getting involved. That's a wonderful practice. But here it's saying that even witnessing is part of the whole relativity. To be a witness, there has to be something that I am witnessing. I have to be a subject, and there has to be an object that I'm witnessing. If there's only a non-dual reality, who witnesses what? And so yes, witnessing is a wonderful practice. So again, to state the same thing again that I stated a moment ago, we always have to be aware of what level we're speaking from. So don't let this statement that witnessing itself is part of samsara discourage you from practicing it. No, it's a wonderful practice. Because the first thing we have to do, from one standpoint, the first thing we have to do in practice of non-dualism is to find out what consciousness in itself is. And to find out consciousness in itself, we have to pull consciousness back from its involvement in other things. And one way to do that is to become the witness, just to become the uninvolved witness, like Mataji's meditation of watching the waves, the thoughts of the mind rising in the mind and breaking on the surface of the mind. But you are not the mind, just watch it. You're not the body, just learn to watch the body. You're not the mind, learn to watch the mind. So witnessing is a wonderful practice. But eventually we find that witnessing itself is part of samsara itself, because you can't witness without the sense of being a subject with in relationship to an object. So let me stop here and let me say a word of conclusion and then questions. So I want to end on just the note that I started on, and that is that reality, the truth, non-dualism is inherent in our present experience. It's right here, it's right now, it's graspable in the midst of our present experience. The full realization, that's a very big thing. It's a very big thing. But all of us have the capacity to begin to see the presence of it here and now. And that itself is a wonderful thing. I started with that verse yesterday, Aham Asmi, I am, I exist. The wonderful truth that I am. That sense of I am, that itself is the highest truth. It's the highest truth as it filters into my present experience. Everything is. Everything exists. There's no existence except for the divine existence. I see that this table is. This is, you are. But isness means the divine being. That idea is even present in Roman Catholic, some aspects of Roman Catholic theology, like the Summa Theologica of St. Thomas Aquinas is present in aspects of Sufi theology, and it's at the heart of Vedanta. That everything that is means it is by virtue of being Brahman, being the divine being itself, because that is what is. That is reality. Sadabhami. Always I shine. That is, consciousness is always present. Even in unconsciousness, the consciousness is there. It's only aware of the absence of everything. Sarabhami. Ahamasmi sarabhami. I am, and I know that I am. And kadachi naham apriyaha. Never am I not dear. I am always dear. When I think that I hate myself, it's hating things that this body and mind did. And yes, this body and mind did doesn't mean that I, as a manifest being, am not going to be responsible for what I did. Yes, the law of karma holds me responsible for what I did. So this is not a way of getting out of responsibility for doing bad things. No. but it is a way of speaking a higher truth. That when I don't like myself, it's things about this relative being that I don't like. It's not existence itself that I don't like. If a person comes to such misery that they kill themselves, it's because they're trying to shut down the noise that is so disturbing to them. It's not because they hate existence itself. And so the verse ends by Brahmaivaha matasidham. Thus it's proven that I am Brahman itself. Because I'm existence, I am. I shine, I'm consciousness. And I am dearness itself. I am Ananda. Satchidananda Lakshanam. I am Brahman itself, whose nature is existence, consciousness, bliss. And that is visible right here and right now. Not in its full glory, but just as the snake in the rope. When we see the snake, we're actually seeing the rope. All we have to do is to look and see it clearly, and then we see, no, it was a rope all of the time. It's not that there's a snake form that we peel away. We don't have to do any peeling. We don't have to open the snake and see, oh, it swallowed a rope. No. There's no snake there. We just have to look. So when we see existence, when we see consciousness, when we see joy, just look at them closer, and we'll find that more and more it's leading us to the reality which they are. So now, questions? Yes, one here.
Sorry, we are forgetful of our nature. Are you referring to the Atman or the Jivatman?
When I'm saying that we're forgetful of our, the question is, when I say that we're forgetful of our nature, am I speaking about the Atman, that is the supreme truth, or am I speaking of the Jivatman, the individual self? We're forgetful actually of both. We're forgetful of the Jivatman in Ramanuja, again, who is the greatest philosopher in the Vishishtadvaita tradition. He says that in the path of devotion, for one trying to realize qualified monism of Vishishtadvaita, he says that first you start with karma yoga to purify the mind, then he says you follow jnana yoga to realize yourself as consciousness itself. Only he means to realize yourself as the Jivatman, but just consciousness itself. Why? Because then we can follow bhakti yoga truly, devotion truly, because then it's, what am I, when I'm trying to relate myself to God, when I'm trying to surrender myself to God, what am I surrendering? Am I surrendering the body? This is a piece of meat. What does God need with this? Am I surrendering my mind with all of its, no. When we're surrendering to God, we're surrendering our very being, and the essence of our being is consciousness. So yes, I've forgotten that I'm the Jivatma, but Advaita says that's not the end point. The Jivatma has forgotten that it's really the Paramatma. And so the Jivatma is first we've forgotten that we're even the Jivatma. And so we hold on to the sense of I am. And that takes us back to the point where we begin to feel consciousness itself as the heart of our being. And there's one more step to realize that that is the infinite consciousness. And then the Jivatva of the Jivatman, the Jivahood, the individualized limitation of the Jiva, that disappears into the nothingness that it came from. And then we realize I am the Paramatma. So both. Another question. Back in the back.
If you could please elaborate what does it mean to have a pure mind, and what are characteristics, and quickly maybe to hear from both the Advaitic sense and the yogic sense.
Now, the last part of the question would be
from an Advaitic perspective and a yogic perspective.
Okay. So, what is a pure mind? And what are its characteristics? How does one get there? First of all, purity means what? Purity means that nothing is mixed into something that doesn't belong there. So if you have pure milk, it's nothing but milk. Something hasn't adulterated it. You don't have dirt in it, you don't have water poured into it to dilute it, to increase the volume for sale or whatever. It's just milk. And so the pure mind means a mind which doesn't have anything in it which doesn't belong there. And so what that means in practical terms is that the pure mind, I won't talk about all of the things, all possible thoughts that we might have which are considered impure thoughts. No, we don't need to think about all of the possible problems that we could have with the mind. All we need to know is that the pure mind is the whole mind. Right now our mind is distracted. It goes out in 1,000 different directions and we're thinking about 1,000,000 different things and concerns. And so the mind is divided in 1,000,000 different directions. Vyavasaya atmika buddhir ekeha kurunandana. Krishna says in the Gita, in the second chapter, 41st verse, he says that the mind with a single determination is single here, O Krishna, O Arjuna, and that the mind without that determination is scattered in many different directions. And so the pure mind is one which is whole, one which is not distracted. And the nature of the pure mind is, it's very strange, but it's the truth. And when we see it, it's not strange at all. We think that the nature of the mind is to be distracted, and to be spread over all sorts of things, and to be impure, and then we do discipline, and then we make it pure. No. The natural mind is the pure mind. The natural mind goes towards the truth. The natural mind flows towards the truth. What we have now is an unnatural mind, which has been made unnatural by a lifetime after lifetime of keeping it distracted and putting all sorts of things in it, making it impure by all kinds of things. So what we have to do is to get back to the natural mind, which is the pure mind, the mind in itself, the mind which is whole, and the whole mind is the mind which is focused, the mind which is present, the mind which is aware, the mind which is not distracted. And so all meditative disciplines of all types are geared towards bringing the mind back into a state of wholeness, focus, presence. Mindfulness exercises, which are wonderful, and we would do well to incorporate more of them into Vedanta, because they're very helpful to Vedanta. Mindfulness practices, they allow the mind just to be present, instead of being out there and scattered and running in different directions, just to bring the mind back and be watchful, just to be present. And concentrative meditation, dhyana, that gives us the power to focus the rays of the mind in a particular direction, towards something spiritual, or even towards the scientific inquiry or studies or whatever else. But it gives us the power to focus the mind. And nididhyasana, these are the three main types of meditation. Mindfulness, which is developing the power of attention, concentration, which allows us to focus the rays of the mind in one direction and which gives the mind great power, and then nididhyasana, which turns the mind back on itself, seeking the source of itself, or seeking the source of consciousness, which is the same thing. And so the pure mind finds that easy. And from a yogic standpoint, even Patanjali says in the Yoga Sutras that the goal of yoga is not concentration of mind. You get the idea from the second sutra that yoga citta vritti nirodha, that the goal of yoga is the cessation of the waves of the mind. And so you think that, well, that's the goal of yoga, is to calm the mind. No. Why is that important? Tada drashtu swarupe vastanam. Because then, when the waves of the mind have stopped, then the seer, the self, the purusha, or the atman, is established in its own nature. So the purpose of meditation, according to yoga, is so that the self can know itself in its own glory. Vrittisa rupyamitarathra. Because when the mind is distracted, then we're identified with the waves of the mind. So that's the yogic approach to meditation, as far as the goal goes. And the Vedantic approach is to, it's already 4 o'clock, so I'll end with this. The Vedantic approach is to bring the mind, or is to know my identity as separate from the mind. That can be done with the help of meditation, or it can be done through discrimination, through understanding, through conviction, through holding on to the truth, whatever way we do it. But the Vedantic goal is to know that I am not the mind. And the yogic way is to perfect the mind until you know that you are not the mind. So, we'll end with that. Thank you.